Hello and welcome once again to another painting. This time I have a warning for you. In the unlikely case that you are one of my Sal readers or Charlotte Luckenwalde, and you don't want to be spoiled in any way, I suggest you don't watch this video. Since this is highly unlikely, I'll just continue as it was. I will go into explaining a bit of a different approach to my paintings this time. As you can see, compared to the last painting I did, this time I'm working with a clean line art rather than a pencil sketch, which does make a big difference, as you'll see. This drawing I made on the PC without using paper at all, and when I do that I prefer to use clean line arts because I don't shade my PC sketches as opposed to my pencil sketches that I do shade. Excuse me. Yeah, basically, what can I say? There are some tricks to use when making a line art. As you can see, I use the program ArtRage, which is a very fitting name, I must say. I can't tell you how many times it has enraged me, but that's not the point right now. My point is that ArtRage offers you the possibility to adjust the brush or the pencil or pen, or however I should, like, it simulates an ink pen. It's possible to adjust that to however you need it. You can make it thicker in one end, thinner in the other. You can stabilize your motion so that if you have a shaky hand, the lines will still be clear. I tend to, as you can see, I adjust the stabilizing effect for different areas of the line art. For example, the arms that are pretty smooth line, I use a higher stabilization as opposed to facial features, fingers, folds and clothes and whatnot that require more detailed line work. Yeah, I start out with a general outline and then I go into the details, as you can see. And you can see I have not adjusted the size of the brush once. That is because I prefer to work with pressure. My stylus, I believe it's called, like the pen of the graphic tablet, is pressure sensitive. So when I press down harder, the pencil will draw thicker lines, and when I press down lighter, it'll draw thinner lines. That was my dad. Never mind. Yeah, you see what I'm doing here. It's nothing fancy. It's just a line art. I do add a bit of shading in the line art to show the deepest shades and crevasses, and in this case, in the corner of Klaus' eyes, I'm adding this deep shadow just to show how exhausted and tired and like on the verge of dying he pretty much is, which I'm sorry to do that to you, but the story requires it. No, in truth, it's just my inner sadism. So, I'm sure Taki loves me a lot for putting Klaus through this. Hell yeah! About hair. I do add in a lot of detail here, but I would do that in a pencil sketch or a computer sketch. It's basically the same thing. You'll see the effect that this gives later on when I add shading. Yeah, just adding some more details in there. Veins and scar tissue. A lot of it. Yeah, on the bottom side of Klaus' bicep, I believe that's his bicep. I don't know what muscles are called. You can see that there are some keloid scars that are older, that have basically healed over already, but they are aggravated now due to the highly unpleasant circumstances that have happened now. Again, I'm sorry, but not sorry. I like to outline scars just because oh yeah, I actually add the indentation in the skin of the scar itself, where it was cut into the skin. Ugh, gruesome details. But yeah, what I was saying, the indentations in the scar itself, or rather into the skin, the outline provides a natural shadow for that and makes it easier to believe that it is actually a cut that goes into the skin. Same with Suguri's scars here. I just thought it would make his hands a bit more realistic. In the manga we never see him with scars on his hands, but come on, he's a surgeon. He's gonna have some cuts up and down, like, somewhere. Also, he's a warrior. Like, I don't believe anyone here is completely free of scars, except for maybe Taki. And even he would have some scars, so yeah, I just think it adds to the realism to add a bit of scars and, like, show that people are worn down by life and circumstances and everything. Now we go on to coloring. And what can I say? I might be a bit off with the skin tone. I must admit I could not be bothered to actually sample and check Suguri's actual skin tone, but from memory I believe it's not that bad of a match to what I chose this time here. In more specific situations where I want to, like, actually show a character, or like where the focus of the painting is the character itself, I would probably go ahead and sample the skin tone so I could use it and be accurate about it. But this time I didn't really think it was necessary. It was just, yeah. Same goes for Klaus' skin tone, where I just kind of winged it. I gave him a bit of a more reddish skin tone this time. I believe his skin is a bit more golden toned, but I wanted him to look agitated and kind of fevery and generally flushed, and I thought about making him pale, but even if he were kind of pale, like if his skin were to turn ashy, his skin tone itself would still be a bit dark, and so I believe it would not have worked that well. That's why I chose the more inflamed kind of look. Now, the actual title of this drawing is Taki-drenched cloth, and here I am coloring in said cloth. Again, if you are a reader of my story, Sal, you might want to plug your ears for this one. Basically, this cloth, as I said, is drenched in the sweat and general scent of Taki, and as such it would obviously remind Klaus of him, and so it provides a very needed ounce of comfort in this moment, which I will not go into detail about, but it happens. This is an illustration. I will include it in the story later on. So, yeah. Now, onto hair color for Suguri. You saw I colored in Klaus' hair pretty boringly, like with no detail or anything. Sure, I followed like the contours of the outline, but I didn't add in any detail in the hair itself, the flow of it or the color or whatever. That is because for Klaus I will only add in shading as a detail. For Suguri though, because he's a bit older, he has a bit of graying strands in his hair, and I wanted to add those in. Yeah, you can see I'm just putting in a bit of a gradient there, trying to make things look natural, where the roots of the hair would be the one part that goes white first, because the hair grows back or grows in gray or white. It does not suddenly lose its color. The part that has already grown out that still has color is going to retain that color. So that, I would say, is an important thing to keep in mind. Now on to what I like to call body blushing. Usually you use this term in like doll making terms, but it is fitting here. Well, body bruising would be more appropriate in this situation, because this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm just kind of randomly pressing down with a pen here and there just to add a bit of a random natural texture to the skin, where there's bruises and cuts and inflammation and general nastiness. Again, I'm so sorry for doing this to you, Klaus, but sorry but not sorry. I'm using a kind of bright shade of red here because it's sort of fresh blood. The cuts are fresh, they are still bleeding and dripping. And for shadows and a bit more interesting texture, I use a darker red. Yeah, or also for the deeper parts of the cut. Here we see a lighter red. I go back and forth between different shades of red because, you know, a wound is not going to be like perfectly symmetrical and perfectly shaded with a perfect gradient or anything, you know. It's going to be kind of rugged and with color fluctuations throughout it and everything. Yeah, this bright red might seem out of place for you right now, but it'll look better in the end of everything when it's tied into the rest of everything. But I wanted to have this bright red for like the angry skin look, where the skin is kind of not fully cut open, but very, very inflamed and very not nice, not good. Yeah. Here I'm using the multiply transparency setting, or however you would say that. Sorry, English is not my first language, and I don't use my programs in English, as you might have noticed. Yeah, but I'm using it to add deeper bruises, like where the actual impact happened. Yeah, adding different colors through a bruise, greens and yellows and purples and reds and everything like that. It's so beautiful. As I said, I added scars to Suguri's hands. Those are different colors too, and veins. I might have a thing for veins. I'm not saying I don't. I'm not saying I do. But yeah, I probably definitely do. So yeah, here comes a bit of lip color. I will add more coloring in the second step. Yeah, there you see me do it. Which is what I like to describe as blood flow, as opposed to body blushing. It's sort of, this will have a different overlay or transparency setting, or however I should describe it, because it is supposed to simulate blood flow under the skin. It is not something that is part of the skin itself, or like the skin tone or whatever. I think I'm explaining it a bit complicated, but I hope you understand what I was trying to say with this. Basically, this is just a generally more widespread application of blush, if you want to say it like that. Yeah, I'm putting dark shadows around both their eyes because they're both not exactly in the best state right now. Klaus, for obvious reasons, and Suguri isn't exactly happy about the whole situation either, because Taki is suffering from this, and we all know how protective Suguri is of Taki. Yeah, important, cleaning up the overflowing blush texture here. You'll see I'll go back to this because, you know, in a white background, it's sometimes hard to see faint pink blush, and so yeah, it's fine to miss things as long as you go back and fix them once you notice them. Generally, there isn't exactly a correct order in which way to do things, but just be aware which things need to be done before the next step starts. Like if you merge two layers where the first layer, for example, still has a mistake in it, you might run into trouble trying to fix that mistake later on. Yeah, I'm using an off-white or like a beige color for Suguri's shirt because, as I said in my last video with Twerking Taki, which is so much of a different tone from this one. Oh my, in that video I said I don't like using black colors. And the same goes for white, because again, unless you're looking at direct sunlight, yeah, here you see I'm fixing things, unless you look into direct sunlight, you're not likely to see a true white, like fully straight up white. It's not likely. And so I don't think it would look realistic to put a clean, crisp white shirt into, first of all, a dirty situation and dim lit placement. It just wouldn't look natural, it wouldn't look realistic, I think. Also, again, it limits the possibilities for shading and highlighting. So there's my reasoning. Here I'm just haphazardly adding some texture to the wood just because I wanted to show that it is wood and not like metal or just a brown thing. Yeah, oops, I skipped a bit here. Basically, yeah, you see I'm cleaning up the line art once again where I didn't see that I drew out of, that I went over the lines. But basically what I did, I added a gradient for a background, because the scene is not focused on the background. That's why I don't bother adding in very detailed background or like much of a scenery behind them, because they are the focus of this illustration. And that is often what I do with my paintings. I don't add in elaborate backgrounds unless I absolutely have to. Welcome to another program here. This is a thing I do. I switch programs frequently, and I like to often merge effects with layers and kind of toning them down but still having them there, if that makes sense. Yeah, but here we go on to shading, and in the last video I used another program. I used Art for shading. This time I use Photo Impact, which is kind of like an older version of Photoshop, kind of like from a different maker. And it probably has less possibilities and less effects and whatever, but I can't actually use Photoshop on my PC, or actually this is the family PC, so I can't use Photoshop on the family PC. I can't use it on mine either, but that's not the point. I don't know why, I don't know why, and I've gotten used to using Photo Impact for so long. I'm not sad that I can't use Photoshop, so the point is not in which program you use, the point is in how you use it, and as such I think if you do it right you can achieve the same look with Photoshop that you can achieve with Photo Impact. Yeah. So this is the first basic shading, just like to add a bit of a background shade, so to speak. And I haven't decided on the light source yet, which I just now did. And now I will be going in with a darker gray to add in the actually detailed shading. And you'll see this shading is pretty detailed. You'll see I will blur out things because I'm not fond of the cel shaded look of like typically anime and comic style. I just don't think it looks natural. I don't think it looks that great. It's just not with my style. It's a preference. If you prefer a clean, shaded look, sure, go ahead and do it. It's just not my thing. Our neighbors are being loud, and my PC is stuttering. Yeah, so just adding a bit of shading here and there, going through the hair a bit. And yeah, it is important to note, this is shading. This is not gray or otherwise colored hair. Same goes for Klaus' hair. Since he does not have gray hair, yet, I didn't add any fluctuation in his hair color. There will be only shadows added in later. And yeah, you'll see what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm shading all the folds, making sure to keep in mind which way the fold is facing, if that makes sense. You wouldn't want to shade the upside of a fold when the upside is actually the part that is lit. It just would kind of break logic in that case. Also, I added a general shadow from the side where the light is not hitting, and also Suguri's arm is blocking the light. It's kind of a thing, I gotta say, I'm probably making mistakes with my shading here. Like, if you were to absolutely meticulously analyze the shading of everything, there would be probably a ton of mistakes, but that's not the point of this painting. And it might seem like I'm just being lazy and not trying hard enough, but honestly, I freak out so much about my artwork, I have to draw a line somewhere. And do I think I'll improve one day? Sure. Do I think I need to get every single detail perfect? No, I don't think so. An illustration is not meant to be, in my experience, in my the way I do things, an illustration is meant to bring across a scene. It is meant to show an emotion or something. This moment, for example, is a very emotional one, where Suguri, who actually kind of hates Klaus, for once does a thing to help him, because he knows that if he doesn't help him, Taki's going to go down as well. And so that is a moment I found worthy to illustrate. So I don't need to get every single detail perfect. Sure, it would be nice to be an amazing artist and get everything perfect, but nobody's perfect, and I certainly am not, and my art isn't either. So don't freak out about things that you're not good at yet. You can improve. There's going to be so many paintings ahead of you, I hope. And same goes for me. I have so much to paint, so many ideas, so much to put to paper. It doesn't matter if I get one painting better or not so good or make mistakes. I'll learn from them. I'll kick my own ass once I look back at them and go, oh no, I totally screwed up this part of the shading, or I totally messed up the coloring here. But I learned from it. And what I did good in one drawing or painting is still going to be good. So, yeah, don't be afraid of making mistakes and failing every once in a while. And now finally, to what I have been saying all this time, Klaus' hair. You see, I followed the line art here with the shading, because the line art is meant to represent the strands of hair that are falling over each other and laying beneath each other, so it makes sense to follow the line art for shading. Then, yeah, I know Klaus' elbow looks a bit strange, which is, I tried to show that it is twisted behind his back. Looking back at it, I think I kind of failed with this, or like, it does look unnatural, but I don't think I did a good job on that one. Yeah, I admit that. If you look at the time, it was very late when I made this painting, so yeah, I know it's excuses all over the place. I'll shut up for a bit. Now, hey, I'm back. I am using a smudge tool to soften the folds and the shadows of them. And this is what I said. As I said, I don't like the clean cel-shaded look, and so I try to not do that. The thing is, you need to know what you're doing with the smudge tool. You need to know where you're going, or the blur tool, which I'm using right now. Some parts will be shaded more harshly, and other parts will be shaded more softly. Generally speaking, the closer something is to the light source, the harsher its shadow is going to be, because there is the most light hitting the surface, thus making the highlight stronger, and the absence of that light is in turn going to make things look darker. Then also, yeah, obviously the further away something is from a light source, the softer and fainter the shading is going to be. Also, edges tend to be strongly shaded, where it's just a clear cut from light to no light, as opposed to spherical or otherwise rounded shapes, where the shadow is more gradual. What else can I say? It's okay to sometimes not blend out a shadow when you think it is not meant to be shaded strongly. Like, for example, you see the shadow of the handkerchief. It is, or the cloth. It is kinda blurred, but not quite, and that is because it is very close to the skin. So the shadow is not diffused. In any case, I would suggest to look at things in real life and try to figure out how the shadows and light work in real life. That is how I learned, and I think that is the best way to learn things. And there you see me making a mistake, because I forgot that in the previous layer I added shading already. Go me! So I have to fix things differently. Or not the previous layer, the previous shading had a gradient to it, and so I would screw up the gradient if I were to go over it with more shading or with white to correct things. So again, you can fix things, just be aware that there's points in your work where things might end up being too far gone to fix them. And there we go. I'm adding a much darker, well, not much, but considerably darker shadow to Suguri's face, because he is closer to the light source. Thus, he would be shaded more harshly, as I said, because the light source is closer and the light hitting him is stronger. Also, I use it to deepen the folds that were otherwise lost in the overall shadow before. Use the dark shadows sparingly. You don't want to overpower everything. Otherwise, like, if you're painting in the end of everything is a mush of gray, you kind of made a mistake in this one. So be aware how you use your light and shadow. Yeah, here I'm also adding more shading to the back of Klaus' torso, just because it is so far from the light. Now again, there is harsh shading because there is no light or very, very little light hitting it. Again, blurring things because his arms are spherical, or like cylindrical, and so the light would fade softly and not in a harsh line. This is a tool I like to use. It is basically like a simple spotlight effect. I like to use it to add a tint to my shading, or like make the light source look clearer. I also like to color adjust my shading, where in this case I use quite cold tones to bring out a cold and menacing scene, and I even adjust it even further so the light is not really light, and the color of the light is more greenish because it kind of looks more sickly. Here I see a bit more chalky shading that I need to blur, and since we use the multiply transparency setting, we can now use white to put in not shadows. It's not exactly a highlight, but it's a part that is free from shading. I use it to bring out the edges of the scars a bit, because I think they should be visible, because they are kind of the focal point of this painting, as, again, as cruel as it seems. And we're just kind of blurring it a bit. It's a selective blur that doesn't blur everything, but just makes the blurred parts more blurred, if that makes sense. Now, there are a few adjustments. I often make adjustments that A, in the end don't show up at all, or B, are very, very minor, or I just like to have the extra step in there, because I think it might make a difference, even if it's only something that I notice. But hey, at least I made the effort, right? Now on to actual highlighting. As I said, just now we used the multiply inlay setting or overlay setting. I still don't know how to say this. And now we're using reverse multiply, where highlights show up very nicely, and that is why I use it for highlighting, for obvious reasons. The opposite of shading is highlighting, right? Right! I use it sparingly. I don't want this to look too radiant and glossy and pretty, because like I doubt anyone here has the time to fix their highlights and put on fresh makeup. They're probably a bit sweaty. That would provide some sort of highlight, and obviously there's a light source. But aside from that, and yeah, the scars are glossy because they're wet, because there's fresh blood on them. But otherwise, I don't think highlighting would be appropriate here. Same goes for Klaus' hair, which I did not specifically highlight. I will go over it with the, I believe it's the dodge tool, the opposite of the burn tool. Just to add a slight bit of highlight. And onto another program. Yeesh, I'm fast. But yeah, right now I'm adding kind of like a cloud texture over everything with a very low opacity. And I think it adds a bit more natural flair to everything, because again, there's going to be fluctuations in light and shadow, and it just makes things look less flat. Yeah, this is basically just color adjustment, adding subtle effects here and there to just give a more interesting flavor to everything. Here you see I'm adding a very greenish tone to a faint highlighting situation, because it again makes things look that much more eerie. And I believe that would be it. We're nearly done. I hope you, as much as possible, enjoyed this video, and maybe you learned something, maybe you thought it was horrible, but well, that's it. I guess. Bye. See you next time.